Yeah, this is one of the newer studies. So some of the ones we'll be looking at this afternoon are more kind of staff created. So probably what you'll find on some of them, at least, more of the teaching notes are in the study itself. Just like I wrote this one from scratch, for instance. So a lot of it is here in the walkthrough. But sort of how I teach this one is I just kind of set the table with the fact that we've spent, I guess at that point, 3 weeks talking about real devotional life, 2 weeks of word, and then 1 week of prayer. So kind of sort of set the table that's the basis of the anchored life. But if it doesn't play out in community, then it's not. Then we're really not accomplishing what God has for us, or even as Pastor Pete talked about yesterday, that we are the measurement of our heart's devotion to God is sort of played out in how we love other people. So that if we don't have this anchor of real community, then we're really kind of missing out on what God intends for us and as followers of Him. So it's kind of broken down into sort of the theological / backstory and then application. So basically the core of the kind of backstory scriptures in Genesis and then Acts. So we look at the origins of real community, have them read kind of in Genesis about God's nature is community, is Trinitarian. Let's talk about what that looks like in terms of the God that we worship, and then in Genesis 2, looking at how so we're just as one, we're made in God's image. So what does that mean? It means that we're meant for community as well. And then in Genesis 2, looking at the fact that aloneness, that non-community was the only aspect of creation that wasn't good, and that God solved that by creating human community. So having a conversation about, yes, the relationship with God is one form of community, one form of relationship, but that we're created for community with one another as well, as laid out from the get-go in Genesis and the origins. So kind of set the table with that, and when it comes to the characteristics of real community, I'll go with the New Testament, look at the early church, the Acts 2:42 through 47 passage, and you can see I kind of frame it as this is Jesus as departed. He's gone up to heaven. Pentecost has happened, and kind of this is a picture of what the early church looked like. And it's kind of important in this kind of conversation that you kind of delineate which verses you read as you're going through. So if you read Acts 2:42 through 46, and have a conversation about that, and then read kind of the final verse, and have a conversation about that. So the first 4 verses, I just have somebody read it, and then ask what are the key elements you see of real community being played out. And I think I have some blanks. I've got 4 blanks, and it's the goal wasn't necessarily that they get all 4 right on the head. I don't think anyone's going to say truth-centered. But these 4 bullet points are sort of the framework of someone's going to say, oh, well, they prayed a lot together, or they were generous with each other, they spent time together, and that as you kind of guide them through what they observe, I've kind of given different points to make as you read it. So for instance, prayer-centered, that real devotional life was at the center of their kind of real community. Generosity, talked about how much they valued one another, and kind of how generous they were to each other. When I talk about generosity, sometimes bring in the thing we've seen from time to time happen of core group members kind of helping one another get to retreats or get to Sikkim, or really just talk about what it would look like if your core group is a generous core group, or if it was a as a body, kind of live this out. What are some things that we could do, and have them share ideas, but also kind of put the idea in the mind of, supporting one another, financially when finances are difficult for a core group member. So togetherness, in that little mini conversation, just try to kind of emphasize what real community time together spent looks like. That this wasn't interaction from a distance. The apostles and community believers weren't Facebook friends, but they had real relationships with each other, and that's kind of how we measure our relationships with one another. So, each time I teach it, different things get emphasized more or less, but you just kind of basically want to hit kind of these 4 sort of characteristics you see, and then let the conversation go as far as one direction as you want to, based on kind of the 4 guiding rails there. So that's the first part of the Acts 2, and then the verses 46b to 47. I really should probably write on the notes here what. There actually isn't a 46a and b in the passage, which is kind of break it up in my head. So probably should write out kind of what the wording is to where you should stop. So sorry, I'm just moving here. So in Acts, do you want to read it real quick, Aaron? Just so we all are on the same page.
Starting at 46b?
Just starting in 46.
Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So I guess sort of at the breaking bread together, it's kind of where that is. So I'll put that in the notes for moving forward to be more clear. But sort of the point is that you have this conversation about kind of what real community looked like in the early church, and then at the very end of the description, you get all this incredible fruit that came from their community. So you have they were filled with joy, glad and sincere hearts, led to praise of God. So it's talking about how real community is life-giving, and that it's a different type of community than one in which it's constantly bringing one another down. The other fruit is just see that they were attractive to people outside of the community, that people were brought into the community daily through salvation, and just the fact that real community is something that is attractive not just to people within the community, but to those outside of the community, and that are just sort of some of the fruit. There's not blanks there; it's one big old blank where conversation based around that different aspects of fruit of real community can be had and have a conversation about that. So that's sort of the biblical background and sort of vision casting for real community. And then from that, we kind of launch in a different direction of talking about what it looks like to live in a real community. As I say here in the kind of paragraph, that we can always see the fruit of real community in the communities we're a part of. That we go have problems, there's sin, selfishness, a lot of the things that kind of get in the way of us flourishing in communities, and kind of go from that into 3 kind of vital components of real community to allow ourselves to flourish as kind of broken individuals and real community. So the 3 aspects, or the 3 components, are kind of servanthood, forgiveness, and carefronting. So those are the 3 blanks that they fill in. And what I do is basically just give them so first blank is servanthood. Let's turn to Matthew 20, and then kind of read about the Jesus who came not to be served but to serve, and have a conversation about what it kind of looks like to kind of sacrifice our needs for the needs of those around us, and again, for the most part, I try to frame things in terms of their core groups, because that's the community that matters most to them, where they can really live this out. Sometimes it's with roommates. Sometimes the roommates are there and same as helper group together, so that's fun. Especially when you get to talking about the forgiveness and care fronting. So with forgiveness, it's a passage about. Actually, do you want to turn to it? Right now, I can't remember exactly which passage it is.
Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Mm-hmm. 7 times, 7 times?
It depends on the translation, I guess.
Well, 77.
Yeah,
it's
a lot. It's like 1.3 billion. It's a lot. So here, so in talking about forgiveness, I really stress kind of a couple of the, I guess, kind of catchphrases we have in Chi Alpha. So what God does in you, He wants to do through you. So talking about the relationship between a real devotional life, kind of being forgiven by God and understanding, experiencing His grace, and how we have to, or not that we have to, but out of response, we should pass that on to those around us, and that forgiveness is a part of that. And then also talk about, I kind of pose the question of, when we don't, when we choose not to forgive, kind of what happens to us, what happens to the other person, what happens in that particular relationship. And it's just an opportunity to talk about how, the bitterness that comes out, the fact that, when we think about it, we don't really want the fruit of unforgiveness, in our lives or in our relationships. But that is kind of what is produced, what happens. And I don't know why I don't have it in here, but so bitterness, kind of the flow of grace is halted. And another thing, I guess maybe I should put it in here, but just the idea that for forgiveness to happen, somebody has to absorb the wound, and that in those situations, kind of we are the ones, if we're the ones who've been offended, have to choose to absorb whatever's been done to us. So let me write that down. So that's forgiveness. The final one, which is interesting to do in discipleship group, because usually they haven't heard of the phrase before, so they laugh. But sometimes they have, which I've been impressed by. That some guys are like, oh yeah, I know about care fronting. A group leader taught me, so it's a sign that things are working. But care fronting, it's basically the Matthew 18 passage is just the one about how the process of reconciliation and going to someone who is in sin, one-on-one or two-on-one, and kind of bringing about that restoration, and really just address the fact that we have to be a community that kind of loves each other enough to go into that awkward space of confronting, and there's a community in the second bullet point that realizes that the most loving thing we can do is confront others in their sin. We have to care more about our brother's future than his feelings in the present moment. And that is, and that care fronting is, it's a vital part of, who we are and real community, looking out for one another. So kind of after I go through those three, sort of just kind of challenge, kind of ask them, so where, as you think about these three things, like where's maybe somewhere that you'd need to grow in this week, or, as you look at your own life or your own community, where's somewhere one of these three aspects maybe that you feel like is the hardest to do, maybe one that you feel like is easier for you to do, and just sort of have them process through kind of how they could apply, all three, or even, just one of them kind of in the near future. So, and I've had guys, the next week, somebody come back to the discipleship group and say, I knew I needed to confront my roommate about this, and I did, and it went, great. And then, I shared a little testimony about how the confronting went. So, I'd really, encourage the guys to apply one of these three, or kind of live in greater measure in one of these three components of real community. So, and with that, it's a pretty full 50 minutes or less than that of content, but with the Bible verses and everything, memory verses. So that's kind of the lesson. So I did share a few things just in the description that weren't in the notes, so I'll go back and add some of those things for when you get around to teaching it. But kind of like I said, there's not a ton outside of the notes for what to teach. So, do y'all have any questions about it, or any input to, as I mentioned, we're kind of tweaking some of these after teaching you all, so any feedback you'd have just from kind of perusing it, of changes or additions, or Cool. So, any questions? Bring on the next social teacher. What do you think?
I was thinking of who I'm going to care from.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Did we sort of like do the discipleship group?
Yeah.
For you all?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So you got an idea of how to do one.
Yeah.
Right. So
like
this is just sort of So, but I did share some things that I would ways to send the conversation as you teach it. So, cool. Well, that's about all I got. So,
thanks,
questions. I will see the
thank you.
next one. So.
So you don't have them like guess the word.
Is this mine?
You said that.
Yeah. So like.
Do you ever have them guess the word?
Guess the word. Like, what do you?
Pete's approach is much more like read the passage first.
And then guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, like,
So.
what do you see in this passage? Kind of like discovery of it.
Yeah, I think that I don't think the way is wrong. I think that, so I do like for the characteristics of real community, that is like, so you read it and then tell me what you see, and you're not really going after like 4 bullet points, so you probably arrive at basically the 4 same things. If they don't say generosity, then you can just be like, oh, you guys, you missed something. Sure, and so for the origins, for instance, that's. So the key questions in bold, kind of have some key questions. What does this verse say about God's nature, about our nature? So that's kind of investigative. What are the key elements of real community here? Even with fruit, kind of what do you see? The experience, and then turning that to, do you experience that in your core group? Do you experience that in Chi Alpha? What would it take to get that? Like, do you want to? Like, is this exciting or not? And, why are you here? If it's not, what's wrong with you? I'll say that. Hello, camera. This could be some random videos. But then, when it gets to the living, like I feel like it'd be kind of a little bit cheesy to be like, read Matthew, like, or 18, like what is the important aspect of forgiveness? Yeah, because that's like said 18 times in the passage. So I just don't remember about forgiveness. So of course they never even say, like, they couldn't even possibly guess the confronting word. So they explain what care and confront. Oh, yeah. I do explain what confronting is. That it's confronting, or it's confronting with the intention of, from a vantage point of love and concern. I don't think I said that to you all, but yeah, that confronting is not getting on somebody because you want to point out their faults or feel better about yourself by bringing them down. That confronting has to be done out of love and for their good. So Yeah. So any other, that's good question, Aaron. Help clarify things. Any other clarification questions? Y'all? No. Cool. Alrighty.